Hi, my name is Sierra Napoleon, and I am a senior chemistry major at Louisiana Tech University. And today I will be presenting my senior capstone project, Biochemical Evaluation of Homeopathic Remedies as Over-the-Counter Treatment for Vaginal Yeast Infection. So, what is a vaginal yeast infection? A woman can acquire this when yeast that is naturally found in her body overgrows to the point where it becomes pathogenic. 90% of vaginal yeast infections are caused by Candida albicans. However, a woman can acquire a vaginal yeast infection from a non C. albicans strain of yeast. Vaginal yeast infections are the second most common vaginal infections in the United States, and they affect up to 75% of women at least once in their life. And there are even women who experience chronic vaginal yeast infections. So currently, we have fluconazole, miconazole, and different types of drugs on the market to treat vaginal yeast infections. However, there are women who report having side effects to these drugs. There's increased antimicrobial resistance, and women who suffer from recurring vaginal yeast infections report unsuccessful attempts with these medicines. So there are women who are looking towards homeopathy as a more desired form of treatment. So, similar to traditional forms of medicine, these homeopathic remedies for vaginal yeast infections can be in the form of a suppository or they can be taken orally. We notice that a lot of popular homeopathic remedies have direct contact with the vagina. So, for this project, we wanted to see if these homeopathic remedies could effectively treat a vaginal yeast infection. And for this project, we used 4 different homeopathic remedies: yoni pearls, yeast arrest, boric acid suppositories, and tea tree oil suppositories. And we used these because we saw that they were very popular on social media and on YouTube. When looking at the number of YouTube search results that each remedy had, tea tree oil suppository had over 2 million. However, what we saw with yoni pearls were very drastic results and very drastic testimonies from women. So, why are homeopathic remedies being used? The 3 big reasons that we see are affordability, current pharmaceutical drugs are ineffective, and a lack of a new drug, and distrust in current medical practices. When looking specifically at the yoni pearl, we see that they advertise that they can cure anything from vaginal dryness to something as big as fibroids and endometriosis. And that claim is actually supported in this customer review of yoni pearls. I've been suffering from swelling and pain since having my child 3 years ago. Yoni steams have always been helpful, but the pearl really drew some nasty dead skin, damaged material, and what I believe to be fibroids or cysts. It is not pretty work, but the skin texture felt completely different afterwards. I would recommend it if you had the intuition that you need to clear house. So these homeopathic treatments seem to aim towards women who are already at a higher risk to have a vaginal yeast infection. And that could be women who are pregnant, women who are taking oral contraceptives, and women who have a disease that compromises their immune system. When looking at the Lady Secret Yoni Pearl product description, they also add that their target audience are women with irregular menstruation, long-term lack of blood, sedentary white-collar workers, and dark-skinned, poor-spirited women. The FDA does not regulate these homeopathic treatments, so we can't say with any scientific proof that these treatments are safe and that the results these women are seeing are real. So for this project, we wanted to test these homeopathic treatments. Up to the left, you can see the experimental pathway that we use for this project. For this presentation, I will be focusing on Saccharomyces cerevisiae, which was our model organism, and how the homeopathic treatments affected the glucose metabolism of S. cerevisiae, and how it affected both the ethanol and the CO2 yields. We also tested the fermentation wines for residual glucose. However, that is not in this project. That is not in this presentation. And we also have further studies going on to test for anti-inflammatory properties, yeast viability, and also antimicrobial resistance. So how this experiment was conducted, all of our fermentations took place in Erlenmeyer flasks that were in 37 degrees Celsius water baths. So in the flask, we had our media, our Saccharomyces cerevisiae, and treatment. Tubing connected the Erlenmeyer flask to a beaker that contained calcium hydroxide. The CO2 produced from the fermentation would go to the beaker and create calcium carbonate. After the fermentation ended, the calcium hydroxide solution was filtered to receive the calcium carbonate, and after drying, that calcium carbonate amount was quantified. So the first results we saw determined whether we could use S. cerevisiae as a model organism moving forward. So we tested CO2 production of S. cerevisiae with a dextrose solution and a simulated vaginal fluid. And we saw that the CO2 production was lowered by 36.6%. So we believe that there were components in the vaginal fluid that were inhibiting the yeast growth. So we tested lactic acid, acetic acid, and we tested it against our control, which was a dextrose solution. And we saw that lactic and acetic acid were inhibiting the growth of S. cerevisiae, but we were still able to get quantifiable results from S. cerevisiae. So this proved that we could use this as a model organism moving forward. So here we have a glycolysis schematic of S. cerevisiae. And as you can see, there are two pathways that lead to your two products. There is a respiration pathway, which leads to CO2, and there is a fermentation pathway, which leads to ethanol. And we can use this to see how our homeopathic treatments could affect S. cerevisiae metabolism. If they would just affect respiration, if they would just affect fermentation, if they would affect both, or if they would affect neither. So this result shows how homeopathic treatments and the dosage of these homeopathic treatments affected S. cerevisiae respiration. So when we use the recommended dose for each of the homeopathic treatments, they all increased CO2 production when compared to the control. It wasn't until we doubled the dosage that we saw a CO2 reduction. And that reduction ranged from 31.1% to almost 63%. So looking at these results, we can see that yeast arrest is the most effective, followed by boric acid, the tea tree oil, and finally the yoni pearl. So the next result shows how homeopathic treatments and their dose affected S. cerevisiae fermentation. And we saw that when we doubled the dose of each homeopathic treatment, only tea tree oil saw a reduction in ethanol. The other three saw an increase. And boric acid especially saw a 22.1 increase in ethanol production. So here we see how the treatments affected respiration and fermentation. So we can look at both the CO2 yields, the ethanol yields, and the percent difference from the control. When looking at the CO2 yields, all of them did better with the double dosage as compared to the recommended dosage. However, yeast arrest specifically did better with the both the recommended dosage and the double dosage. However, when you look at the fermentation side, yeast arrest did not do so well. Yoni pearl actually did really well at inhibiting the ethanol yields. So it looks as if with yeast arrest, it is doing something with the respiration pathway to impair it in some way and inhibit those CO2 yields. And likewise, yoni pearl may be doing something with the fermentation pathway to inhibit ethanol yields. So we can maybe conclude that yeast arrest may be fungostatic compared to the other three, they may be fungicidal. Now, with this being said, this does warrant more studies. Due to time constraints, we weren't able to do the multiple runs that we initially had planned, and we weren't able to test different batches for their reproducibility and things like that. So in conclusion, the yeast arrest was most effective at stopping yeast respiration. The yoni pearl was most effective with inhibiting ethanol fermentation, but the yoni pearl was also least reproducible, and this could be because of poor quality control. The tea tree oil was the most reproducible, and the boric acid suppository promoted fermentation. So all of these homeopathic treatments showed a dose-responsive impact on yeast respiration and ethanol fermentation. All of these treatments would likely require a higher dosage if they should be a cure for an acute or a chronic vaginitis. Yeast arrest seems to be fungostatic. The others either affect fermentation or they perform indifferently. And of course, we would need to perform variations in product formulation, standardization, quality control, reproducibility, and that would require more studies. So for future work, we would like to investigate the antifungal activity, investigate their cytotoxicity, determine if they have any anti-inflammatory activities, and understand how these treatments specifically affect the vaginal flora. And depending on these results, we would like to isolate and identify these active components responsible for a desirable effect to synthesize a new homeopathic treatment. So, in conclusion, I would like to thank the American Society for Biochemistry and Molecular Biology for giving me this opportunity to present at experimental biology and giving me this opportunity to virtually present in front of my peers. I would like to thank my PI, Dr. Marcia Cole, and my research group, Cole's Candy Cartel. I would like to thank Louisiana Tech University Chemistry Department for all of their support, and I would like to thank everybody for watching. Thank you.